Peace, peace, peace. What it is, it's your brother Tyvon Swainell, aka the Orthodox Moor, aka the Seven Pillar Saracen. Um, and in honor of Black History Month, I thought I would do my DNA reveal, my DNA results from 23andMe. I recently got them back. Um, I've been able to go over them, study a lot of stuff. Um, I'm going to be doing a small series where I go over my DNA results here, um, and also document my GEDmatch information, etc. So definitely stay tuned for that, family. But without further ado, let me share my screen and we can start getting into my 23andMe. You know, let me make this a little bit bigger for the family. Make sure y'all can see this. So it says, Tyvon, explore your ancestry through DNA. So this should be real interesting. Going into this, um, I got a lot of things confirmed that I already knew. And I got a couple surprises that were pretty interesting. Um, so my father is of African descent, and he's from uh, Alabama by way of Georgia, and potentially his family came even from South Carolina before they came from Georgia. Um, my mother is from northern New Mexico and descends from uh, Spanish people, crypto Jews from North Africa and Spain, etc., um, Native Americans, and she believed to be Scotch Irish, which was one of the surprises. Um, we found out she was not as Scotch Irish as she thought. Um, so yeah, without further ado, oh yeah, also we were really concerned. My family's really interested in about this the crypto Jewish part of her ancestry because the crypto Jews in northern New Mexico, southern Colorado are a new population that was found very recently in the past couple decades or whatnot. Um, and there's a lot of speculation as to how many people in the Americas actually have Sephardic and Maghrebi ancestry, etc., whatnot. It's speculated that as many as 200 million people in the Americas have Sephardic ancestry. Um, so I had to get multiple DNA tests done to be able to look into that. I'm still waiting back on the results from those. Um, 23andMe does not do so well in terms of looking at the different Jewish genetic components. They only test for Ashkenazi Jewish DNA. So I'm assuming that any DNA that I get from my mother will get thrown into either that or the Spanish, Portuguese, etc. Maybe a bit of North Africa. Um, but I won't know until I get it confirmed through other DNA tests. So MyHeritage, for instance, is probably one of the best in terms of how many different Jewish genetic types it tests for. They test for Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, Sephardic, Maghrebi. Um, they test for Yemenite, and they test for Ethiopian. And then I also got family tree DNA done, and they test for, again, the Sephardic, the Ashkenazi, the Mizrahi, and I believe the Yemenite, but not the Ethiopian. Um, so those would be really good for confirming that concept. But yeah, 23andMe not so good for the Jewish DNA. Either you're Ashkenazi or you're not. um, and if you're something else beyond Ashkenazi, they kind of either wherever you're related to them, they'll throw it in, or they'll appropriate your DNA, put it somewhere else. Um, so yeah, without further ado, let's get into the view your ancestry. So it says Tyvon Swain, you are 46.3% sub-Saharan African. Of that, I am 43.1% West African. Of that, I am 28% Nigerian, 12.4% Ghanaian, Liberian, and Sierra Leonean, 2% Senegambian and Ghanaian, and broadly 0.7% West African. Then it says I am 2.6% Congolese and Southeast African. Of that, I'm Angolan and Congolese, 0.5% African hunter gatherer, and 0.1% broadly sub Saharan African. Let's get into this. Let's see what it's saying. Tyvon, your DNA suggests that 28% of your ancestry is Nigerian. Nigeria's population is the largest in Africa and one of the most diverse, with over 250 ethnic groups. The country's arid north is home to people of mostly Hausa and Fulani descent, while the Yoruba people are concentrated in the southwest. The Lajau people in the tropical south and the Igbo people in the southeast. As much as 2/3 of African Americans' sub-Saharan DNA may trace back to Nigerian ancestors due to the disproportionate impact of the Atlantic slave trade on the people of that region. Yeah, I thought I was going to have a large portion of Nigerian DNA. That's just something we've always speculated in the family, etc. And again, a lot of people, like it says here, a lot of people of African American descent have Nigerian genetics. And so what's interesting is that, like it says, there's 250 ethnic groups in Nigeria. So this is why it becomes incumbent among people to do stuff like a GEDmatch test, etc. So you can actually figure out who you connect to a bit more specifically. Because again, they'll tell you just broadly that you connect to 28% of Nigeria or Nigeria, period. They're not going to tell you which part of Nigeria you connect to. Again, the Hausa, the Fulani, the Igbo, the Yoruba all have different DNA. They're connecting to something that's general. But there's that 28% Nigerian. Okay. So the Ghanaian, Liberian, and Sierra Leone. Let's see what it's saying here. Tyvon, your DNA suggests that 12.4% of your ancestry is Ghanaian, Liberian, and Sierra Leonean. The continuum of genetic diversity stretches from Senegal to Nigeria, but the people of the coastal countries above the Gulf of Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana share a genetic similarity distinct from neighboring regions. The Temne people, who constitute the largest group in Sierra Leone, call this region home, as do the Mende people who reside across West Africa. In neighboring Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, the Akan peoples predominate. Shout out to all my peoples, not only in Nigeria, but Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. You know what I'm saying? %2 Senegambian and Ghanaian. Fishermen all day in the family know that. Tyvon, your DNA suggests that 2% of your ancestry is Senegambian and Ghanaian. It says the people of Senegal, the Gambia, Guinea, and Guinea-Bissau share many traditions related to history or to the history of powerful empires in the region. In the Gambia, the Mandinka people are the largest group, with historical roots along the Niger River basin, while the Wolof people form the majority in neighboring Senegal. In Guinea and Guinea-Bissau, the Fulani people predominate and may have subtle genetic links to North Africa or Western Asia. In the 18th century, around 400,000 people from this region were enslaved and transported to the Americas. Nearly 50,000 disembarked in the United States alone. Now, that's interesting. I thought, yeah, this is very interesting. I'm going to touch on that in a whole nother video. The Fulani people predominate and may have subtle genetic links to North Africa or Western Asia. Definitely touching on that on a whole nother video. But yeah, shout out to all my people in the Senegambia and Guinea. And Guinea-Bissau and all that. Let's see what else is popping. Okay. Congolese and Southern East African, 2.6% of that. I'm Angolan and Congolese, 2.6%. What's up with you? Angola and Congo. Yeah, I like that picture. That's dope. Tavon, your DNA suggests that 2.6% of your ancestry is Angolan and Congolese. Beginning around 3,000 years ago, the genetic tapestry of the Western Congo Basin was transformed by the influx of Bantu-speaking peoples from the highlands of what is today Nigeria and Cameroon. More recently, Bantu speakers in the Western Congo region established the historical Kingdom of Congo, which flourished for over 500 years until its collapse at the hands of colonial powers in 1914. Today, Bantu-speaking people such as the Congo, Teke, Mbochi, and the Songa are significant majorities in the countries bordering the Congo River. That's super interesting. This is actually a really interesting phrase here. Because I was actually just talking to a scholar by the name of Dana Reynolds Marnici, excuse me. And we were talking about basically migrations coming in from East Africa and Arabia, etc., going into Africa for 3,000 years. So I'm definitely going to be touching on this in a whole another video as well, where it says beginning around 3,000 years ago, the genetic tapestry of the Western Congo Basin was transformed by the influx of Bantu-speaking peoples from the highlands of what is today Nigeria and Cameroon. Definitely going to be touching on that in a whole nother video. Shout out to my people in Angola and Congo. African hunter-gatherer. I'm assuming that's looking like some San Pygmy stuff right there. Taiwan, your DNA suggests that 0.5% of your ancestry is African hunter-gatherer. African hunter-gatherer populations represent some of the oldest and most genetically distinct branches in the human family tree. The historically semi-nomadic San peoples of the Kalahari and the closely related Chloe herders in Namibia, Botswana, and South Africa speak indigenous languages characterized by click consonants rarely found in other language families. The Mbuti and Biaka Pygmy peoples of the Central African rainforests, on the other hand, have lost their distinct linguistic heritage but have preserved many unique cultural traditions. Yeah, that's what's up. Shout out to the San people. And then again, talking about some broadly sub-Saharan African. Like, yeah, that just does that. So getting into my European genetics. Now, this is where I was actually shocked more than anything, because I thought that, like growing up, my mother always told me that they were Scotch-Irish or whatnot, or partially Scotch-Irish or whatnot in the family. Almost everybody in her family has black hair, brown skin, and brown eyes or whatnot. But there's a couple people who have green eyes and have fair, like a sandy blondish kind of hair or whatnot. And so we thought that she'd be a little bit more, or she'd contribute a little bit more Northern European genetics or whatnot. But come to find out, not so much. They might have some, but it's not a whole lot. Because I am 38.1% European, of which I know I get almost all of this from my mother. Almost all of it. I saw my paternal aunt's genetics on here in a DNA comparison, and she's 93.9% sub-Saharan African and only 5.6% European. So I know I barely get any European from my father. But yeah, of the 38.1% European, I'm 36.5% Southern European. Of that, I'm 36.4% Spanish and Portuguese. Now, this is where I'm speculating that whatever North African Jewish she is and whatever Sephardic Jewish she is, etc., is getting caught up in this part and was not getting assigned into North Africa or any Jewish part significantly. Because as you can see when it drops down, it says like the Ashkenazi Jewish is only 0.1%. So it's definitely not allocating there, not too much. And I definitely expected to see some connection there with the Ashkenazi Jewish. I thought it'd actually be a little bit more, for the simple fact that when you actually go into the history of how the Jews were expelled from Spain, etc., whatnot, some going to North Africa, some going to West Africa, etc. Some going to Italy, some going to Turkey, all that type of stuff, right? But some actually go into the Netherlands. So shout out to all the Dutch Jewish homies and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? There's a reason why the Western Ashkenazi may look different than the Eastern, etc. Whatnot. Why you got people like Einstein having brown skin, brown eyes, or like olive skin, brown eyes, curly hair, black curly hair, and you know what I'm saying, African genetics and whatnot. Because some of them came through Spain, who also again have ties to Northwest and parts of East Africa from there. Um, Definitely thought it'd be a little bit more of the Ashkenazi Jewish, but yeah, I'm assuming that because I don't have any ties to like Germany, etc., whatnot, that it's probably the reverse to where it's the I'm connected to people who were expelled from Spain but went to the Netherlands, etc., whatnot. So shout out to all the Dutch Jewish homies, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, after that, let's see here. Again, broadly Southern European 0.1%, Northwestern European 0.2%, British and Irish 0.2%. Yeah, this was the shocker. I thought I was definitely gonna be a lot more of this. But yeah, definitely not that much. And when I looked at my aunt's genetics, it's most likely that whatever European genetics I got from my father's side was the Irish. So yeah, definitely not the Scotch Irish on my mom's side like we thought we were. And we'll see what fills in that gap next. So it says Taiwan, your DNA suggests that 0.2% of your ancestry is British and Irish. The British Isles have been continuously occupied by humans for the last 11,000 years. But more recently, the people of the Isles have their genetic finger. Oh, I forgot to do the Spanish, but I'll do that after this. Their genetic fingerprints around the world following centuries of nautical exploration, colonization, and immigration. In the early 20th century, the Republic of Ireland won its independence from the United Kingdom, but the people of these nations share a common genetic heritage rooted largely in Celtic, Anglo-Saxon, and Viking migrations from northwestern Europe. Yeah, and what this definitely gets interesting when you're familiar with certain books like Ancient and Modern Brits or whatnot, particularly when it's talking about like the last 11,000 years. But yet again, that's a whole nother video. But let me go back and read the Spanish and Portuguese because I forgot to read that right quick. Shout out to all the Irish homies, by the way. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to all the British homies in the Speaker's Corner. You know what I'm saying? What's good? Taiwan, your DNA suggests that 36.4% of your ancestry is Spanish and Portuguese. The genetic landscape of the Iberian Peninsula, represented today by the people of Spain and Portugal, was influenced by several Mediterranean civilizations, including 800 years of Arabic North African rule. Now, a small North African genetic signature is present in Iberian DNA, and over 8% of Spanish words carry Arabic origins. Conquistadors from Portugal and Spain colonized parts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas, and DNA signatures of Iberian ancestry are now relatively common in people of Latin American descent. Very true. So yeah, my mother's people go from North Africa to Spain to Mexico, and then to the Americas, or then to North America. They were in New Mexico, the state of New Mexico, before that land was actually part of the United States, like when it still belonged to Mexico. They were my mother's family is related to the original founders of the state of New Mexico, etc. Like the original families that were there, the original population, etc. Wasn't there for a long time. A lot of them do have very Spanish traditions or whatnot. Up until recently, they're talking about North African rule here, whatnot. Up until recently, there's a portion of the people in northern New Mexico who used to celebrate when they actually overthrew the Moors or whatnot. but it became taboo, so they stopped celebrating in public and whatnot. But yeah, shout out to all the people in the Iberian Peninsula and elsewhere. So yeah, this is what we found out when we found out we weren't so British and Irish or Scotch Irish. We found out we were more Native American than we thought because I'm 13% Native American, which means my mother is at least a quarter. Um, we knew she was Native American. We knew that we were Navajo, etc. However, we weren't enough to get blood quantum with the Navajo nation, so we didn't really bother to find out how much we were. We didn't really deal with it like that. We've always repped part of the culture, etc. But yeah, we were surprised to find out that she was at least a quarter. So going into this right quick, I love that picture. I love it so much. It says Taiwan, your DNA suggests that 13% of your ancestry is Native American. The first humans to reach the New World populated much of North, Central, and South America within just a few thousand years following their arrival from Northeast Asia around 15,000 years ago. Despite drastic population losses over the past 500 years as a result of exposure to old world diseases and genocide at the hands of European colonizers, the genetic legacy of these early American trailblazers persists to this day, primarily in Central and South America. Yeah, very, very interesting. I was able to see pictures of my Navajo grandmother from a long time ago and whatnot. My mother actually, the part of northern New Mexico she grew up on is actually also, she pretty much grew up on a Hickory Apache reservation. She even married into the Hickory Apache at one point. Has a beautiful sounding native name. Let me see if I can butcher it, or not butcher it. Tahotlianti, which means she who flies free in the wind. I think it's a beautiful name. But yeah, we when you look at my mother, she looks very Mediterranean, very very. I can drop her off anywhere in North Africa or the Mediterranean, the Southern Mediterranean. She'll fit right in. But what's interesting about it is that she has this like kind of a nose that's it's either Native American or it's Mediterranean. You know what I'm saying? Or what some people even call like a Jewish nose, etc. Whatnot. It has this very, but it can look like all three all at the same time. It's very unique. But it makes a lot of sense because she's at least a quarter native. And it says Chinese and Southeast Asian 0.9%. Taiwan, your DNA suggests that 0.8% of your ancestry is Filipino and Austronesian. Many indigenous Filipinos, including the Aita, Batak, and Mamanawa peoples, are likely descended from one of the earliest dispersals of modern humans out of Africa. However, most Filipinos can trace their ancestry to a much more recent and widespread migration of Southeast Asian seafarers related to the indigenous people of Taiwan. Today, this genetic signature, called Austronesian, meaning southern island, is common across the island of the Pacific from the Philippine Sea to Hawaii and can be found as far away as Madagascar. So that's kind of dope. Very dope. What's funny is I used to have a bunch of Filipino homies. A bunch of Filipino homies. I wonder if that's connecting me to, because the Spaniards made it over to the Philippines as well. I wonder if there's any way that that's connecting me to that or whatnot. But again, this is where doing stuff like the Jed match and all that type of stuff becomes interesting. So Indonesian, Thai, Khmer, and Myanmar. Taiwan, your DNA suggests that 0.1% of your ancestry is Indonesian, Thai, Khmer, and Myanmar. For Myanmar to Indonesia, the people of Southeast Asia are genetically diverse, reflecting the legacies of several migrations beginning over 40,000 years ago. More recently, the region has become heavily influenced by Hindu, Buddhist, and Islamic cultures. Before its fall in the 15th century, the Khmer Empire, encompassing modern-day Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, was the largest land empire in the region's history. Shout out to all my peoples. You know what I'm saying? In Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, etc. And it's saying broadly East Asian and Native American, 0.3%. And it says I'm West Asian and North African, 0.5%. Of that 0.5%, it says Arab, Egyptian, and Levantine. And of that, let me see if it gives me an actual thing to know. Okay. There we go. West Asian, North African, 0.5%. And of that 0.5%, it is all Egyptian. Saying Tavon, your DNA suggests that 0.5% of your ancestry is Egyptian. Ancient Egyptians began harvesting crops over 7,000 years ago along the fertile banks of the Nile, relying on annual floods that were believed to be the tears of the goddess Isis. Following the dynastic period, Egypt was ruled at various times by Nubian, Persian, Greek, and Roman empires. Though these centuries of foreign rule had little impact on Egyptian DNA, since the 7th century Islamic expansion, which brought additional linguistic and genetic diversity to the Nile River Basin, a uniquely Egyptian genetic signature emerged. Today, this ancestry reaches the highest level near the Nile Delta, but is also found throughout Egypt and in the southern Levant. Shout out to all the Egyptian family. Let's see here. Gives me trace region saying 0.2% broadly Melanesian, and 0.1% Bengali and Northeast Indian. Okay. Now, so it'll be interesting to see if this links up to the Indonesian, Filipino, etc. DNA. But yeah, Taiwan, your DNA suggests that 0.2% of your ancestry is Melanesian. Melanesia was first peopled by seafaring voyagers over 45,000 years ago, when the ancestors of indigenous Australian and Papuan peoples reached near Oceania from Indonesia. These early Melanesians interbred with a now extinct hominin species, the Denisovans, and their descendants harbor traces of the ancient encounter of their DNA. Shout out to all my Melanesian family. Let's see. Taiwan, your DNA suggests that 0.1% of your ancestry is Bengali and Northeast Indian. So right now, I need to say, you know what I'm saying, big up to my Bengali family in the UK. Y'all know who you are, you know what I'm saying? I hope you're watching. If I ever come through, we need to go kick it, you know what I'm saying? But Taiwan, your DNA, suggests that 1.1% of your ancestry is Bengali and Northeast Indian. The people of Bangladesh and Northeast India share an ancient genetic history in the region where the Ganges and the Brahmaputra River meet. Tens of thousands of years ago, hunter-gatherers arrived from the west. Later migrations of Austroasiatic, Tibeto-Burman, Burman, Dravidian, and Indo-European-speaking groups brought additional genetic and linguistic diversity to the region. Compared to other South Asian populations, the people of Bangladesh and Northeast India generally have more East Asian ancestry, reflecting the region's role as a genetic crossroads. So yeah, definitely not shocked that I'm 46% sub-Saharan African. Not shocked that I'm 38.1% European. I am shocked at the breakdown of that because I thought it was going to be more British and Irish. You know, I don't think I clicked on this one. There we go. I didn't. Taiwan, your DNA suggests that 0.1% of your ancestry is Ashkenazi Jewish. Let's see what this. Ashkenazi Jewish people settled in Central and Eastern Europe in the late Middle Ages, but their modern descendants remain genetically more similar to other Jewish populations than to their European neighbors, reflecting shared Western Asian origins. In the 20th century, many Ashkenazi Jewish people immigrated to Israel or to the Americas in search of greater cultural and religious acceptance. Today, over 5 million ethnic Ashkenazi Jewish people live in the U.S. So I got to see what my other DNA tests say to see if this is legit or if this took some of the Sephardic and Maghrebi and threw it in here or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have no idea. But like I said, if you're interested about having your Jewish genetics tested out in some of the more popular DNA tests, MyHeritage is definitely number one in that regard. A, it's cheap; it's the cheapest. But B, it has the most genetic types for the Jews. Again, they have the Mizrahi, the Ashkenazi, the Yemenite, the Ethiopian, um, and the Sephardic slash Maghrebi, the North African. They have that all in one category. So they have 5 different types that they test for. Again, the second best after that would be family tree DNA. They test for 4 different types. They test for Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, Sephardic, and Yemenite. And so let's see after that. Check out the DNA timeline. I know a lot of people are going to be curious about that. So let y'all have a good look at that right quick. For those who are interested in looking at this type of stuff, you know what I'm saying? Have at it. You can definitely pause the screen up and take a look at whatever you'd like to look at. And give you a chance to go and look at everything right quick. Yo, yeah, man. It's always interesting to be able to see where you come from in some way, shape, or form. I was always the kind of person that when the old folks would start telling stories, I would shut up and listen. You know what I'm saying? Because I was always curious about this kind of stuff. Um, and so being able to see a timeline like this is very interesting because I can go study these time periods and what was going on in these places geopolitically, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What was going on around the world, et cetera. What was going on culturally with the people, all that kind of stuff. And I soak this kind of stuff up. You know what I'm saying? I am a nerd when it comes to this kind of stuff. I cannot wait to go see what my other DNA tests have to say, because they'll tell me more about other places. For instance, um, I know MyHeritage and Family Tree get more significant when it comes to like places like in West Africa, like Mali and all them kind of things, to where like it might throw you into like a Ghanaian, Liberian, Sierra Leone over here when you might actually have Ghanaian DNA or Malayan DNA, or it might throw you into broadly West African, etc. When it might be Mali. So I'm interested to do a compare and contrast when all this is said and done. So let me go back to my overview right quick. Yeah, let me click on this right quick where we're saying one region in Mexico and Central America. Tavon, your DNA suggests that you had Mexican and Central American ancestors. From the dry riverbeds of Mexico's northern deserts to the mangrove swamps of southern Panama, the landscape of Mexico and Central America is as diverse as the people who live there. Following waves of immigration from Europe and forced migration from Africa. Mixing of these historically separate populations, a process called admixture, resulted in a new genetic and cultural identities that define the region today. For Mexican and Central American people, many of whom identify as mestizo or mixed, it can be difficult to tease apart these diversities, these diverse histories. Excuse me. That's kind of dope. In the last 200 years, your ancestors may have lived in the following locations. And it's given the number one location is Chihuahua. So it's giving me from Chihuahua and sparsely going all the way down through the Yucatan Peninsula, which is kind of dope because I actually have a neighbor from the Yucatan Peninsula. And she says I look exactly like her son. And so she's got dark skin, dark olive skin. She has wavy black hair, brown eyes, and she has like really thick lips, like an Olmec head. And it's really interesting because she says I look just like her. Like she lit like her and her husband literally have a couple of different times have called me like I was their son, thinking I was their son, which is hilarious because like on both occasions like they had to rectify the fact that their son does not live in the state. That's how much I resembled him. They said, which should let you know a lot about what the people in the Yucatan look like. And when they're talking about the mestizo stuff, like how much African DNA is actually within the this part of Central America, etc., whatnot, Mexico. We're going farther back. Let's check this out. This was also one of the. I'm gonna check out my maternal haplogroup real quick. This was one of the bigger surprises. So it says here, Taiwan, your maternal haplogroup is A2G. This ends up being like a Native American haplogroup. And so, again, not being surprised in the fact that my mother's Native American. However, I would have assumed that since the majority of her DNA is European, that she would have had a European or something corresponding to that haplogroup. But turns out not. Turns out that it's A2G. And so let's break this down so you can see where. Let me light this up so you can see it. It says here, your maternal line stems from a branch of haplogroup A called A2. All the members of A2 descend from a woman who lived nearly 16,000 years ago in the northern reaches of land between Siberia and North America. She was a descendant of women belonging to haplogroup A who pushed east from Siberia into the ancient region called Beringia over 20,000 years ago. Beringia was a broad stretch of land that connected Siberia to what is now Alaska. These newcomers became isolated there for thousands of years during the last peak of the Ice Age, blocked on both sides by glaciers and harsh climate. The A2 lineage arose at the end of this period at the Ice Age, or as the Ice Age loosened its grip. By about 14,000 years ago, routes to the east opened up, and the A2 founders continued the migration eastward and down into North and South America. And it says that about 1 in 1,800 people in 23andMe have this A2G haplogroup. So yeah, that was a kind of a shock. Again, not that my mother has Native American ancestry, but that it was her actual maternal haplogroup, that her mother's 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 mother, etc., came through that A2 lineage. Very interesting. Now on a whole nother level, ran into a whole nother shock on my father's side. It says here, Taiwan, your paternal haplogroup is EL94. EL94. Now, when I heard that, I was like, well, what the heck is that? The heck is that? And so, as you keep venturing through, you see the EM96 breakdown. You see this here. The origins of migrations will have to EM96. And then it starts talking about this here, EL94. Your paternal haplogroup EL94 traces back to a man who lived less than 56,000 years ago. 56,000 years ago. Where that took me by surprise. I was like, hold up, wait. Like, so the homie, like Anonymous Hebrew, for instance, right? Shout out to the brother. He's EM180, right? His joint goes back to like 17,000. This joint said 56,000. We were both like, whoa, yo. So this gets real interesting. So some people are like, they'll have a haplogroup to where they'll be like 1 in 600. The good brother Anonymous Hebrew, he was 1 in 2,700 with the EM180. With the EL94, I'm 1 in 6,200. And so basically, what they're saying is that EM or EL 94 is a subclade of EM 132. And this is what it has to say about that. Men bearing haplogroup E-M132 were carried to the Bahamas in the transatlantic slave trade. It says your paternal line stems from a branch of haplogroup E called E-M132, which is seen at low frequencies in the Bahamas on the islands of Abaco, Eleuthera, Exuma, Grand Bahama, and Long Island. This is likely a reflection of historical movements of African and Creole slaves before and after the abolition of slavery in 1807. Over 25% of slaves transported to the Bahamas during the slave trade were from West and Central Africa, which is consistent with the most common location of E-M132. Lower numbers of slaves are taken from the other ports in Africa, including those along the Gold Coast, the Windward Coast, and the Bight of Biafra. Many African ethnic groups were victims of the transatlantic slave trade, including the Fulani and Hausa, two groups in which your haplogroup are heavily represented. So that's a few times I've seen Fulani on here and Hausa and whatnot. And they're saying that they represent a lot of what this haplogroup is. So I'm definitely going to be doing a whole separate video just on this haplogroup and probably one on my maternal haplogroup or whatnot. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, this one's an interesting one, family, when you get into this one, because this one predates the split between EM2 or E1B1A and E1B1B. It's a real interesting conversation. And we had to slow a lot of conversations down when we saw this one. We were like, "Yo, okay, this is a whole different E haplogroup." Okay. So another one for this that's synonymous is E1A. E1A. So let me think. Is there anything else I can show that would be of interest or of import? I can definitely attest that it says here that 99% of your relatives have Native American ancestry. That is true. I've looked up a bunch of my relatives on this, and yeah, there's a lot. The people in my mother's generation around her and whatnot were like at least a quarter to a third Native and whatnot. So I'm definitely seeing a lot of that. But yeah, family, I'm gonna give you one last look at this joint right quick. For the latecomers who are curious, your brother is 46.3% Sub-Saharan African. Of that, I'm 43% West African, 28% Nigerian, 12.4% Ghanaian, Liberian, Sierra Leonean, 2% Senegambian and Ghanaian, 0.7% broadly West African, 2.6% Congolese and Southern East African. Of that, I am Angolan and Congolese, 2.6%. 0.5% African hunter-gatherer, 0.1% broadly Sub-Saharan African, European 38.1%, Southern European 36.5%. Of that, I am Spanish and Portuguese 36.4%, broadly Southern European 0.1%, Northwestern European 0.2%, British and Irish 0.2%, Ashkenazi Jewish 0.1%. And please go back and listen to what I was saying about if you're interested about Jewish genetics, what different DNA companies you should probably go look at. Broadly European 0.13%. Again, the big surprise, I knew I was Native American, but not this much. East Asian Native American 14.2%. Of that Native American 13.0%. The shocker being my mom is close to a quarter percent Native American. We thought maybe a little bit less. We thought she would probably be around 13%. Turns out we were one generation off in how we counted. I am 0.9% Chinese and Southeast Asian. Of that, I am 0.8% Filipino and Austronesian, and 0.1% Indonesian, Thai, Khmer, and Myanmar. Then I'm also 0.3% broadly East Asian and Native American. West Asian and North African, 0.5%. Of that, I am 0.5% Egyptian, with trace ancestry being broadly Melanesian 0.2% and Bengali North Indian at 0.1%. So I hope that was interesting, family. Oh, hold on. Got some comments in this joint. Yeah, family. Appreciate you. Definitely appreciate you for tuning in. Try to keep this video under an hour. Any thoughts, comments, etc., please leave them down below. I love genetic conversations, love DNA conversations. And I definitely look forward to updating when I get my other DNA results to see what's up with the rest of my mother's lineage or whatnot. Definitely look forward to sharing my GEDmatch results and whatnot, because my father's genetics plays a very interesting, has a very interesting story to tell. Again, being that 56,000 years ago, that paternal haplogroup predates the split between E1B1B and E1B1A. It predates the split. So with that, family, I'm going to leave you with a cut. And I'm going to say peace and love.